When I remarried, I didn't tell my new husband that the 3 stores I was managing were mine, and that turned out to be the right decision, because just one day after the wedding, I came home early because I was exhausted and caught him adjusting the dress of his little sister right on my own desk, and the two of them were planning to take over my 3 stores, just like the 3 victims before me. My name is Lauren Bennett. I'm 37 years old. I own 3 independent women's clothing boutiques in the Portland, Oregon area. Not inherited, no investors, not a single dollar borrowed from the bank after the first store became profitable. Every bit of it is mine, completely mine, built from the pain of losing my husband, from sleepless nights, and from a dream I refused to let go of. My husband, Matthew, died of lung cancer when I had just turned 30. We were married for only 4 years. He passed suddenly, leaving me with the mortgage on a small house in suburban Beaverton, a $350,000 life insurance payout, and one last sentence I still remember clearly. "Lauren, do something that makes you proud, even if I'm not here anymore." I did. I sold the house and used every dollar of that insurance money to open my first store, Lauren's Closet, right there in Beaverton. It was a tiny space, barely 800 square feet. I painted the walls white myself, installed the wooden shelves myself, hung the lights myself, and handpicked the very first pieces from small suppliers in Los Angeles. In the beginning, I opened from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., got home at midnight to do inventory, bookkeeping, product photos, and post on Facebook and Instagram, which I taught myself how to use. There were months when I lived on instant noodles and mixed salad just to save money for the next shipment. My first customers were mostly friends, neighbors, and people who felt sorry for a young widow trying to get back on her feet. I chose a very clear direction: clothes for real women. Women who work, who are mothers, who live busy lives, but still want to look good. No fast fashion, no cheap fabric that tears easily. I chose good materials, solid stitching, easy-to-style colors, and reasonable prices so customers could buy a full outfit without guilt. I wanted them to feel a little more confident on the days they wore my clothes. By the 3rd year, the store was making steady profit. I opened a second location in Lake Oswego, a wealthier area where customers were willing to spend on well-cut suits and soft silk dresses. I drove to pick up inventory myself, stood behind the counter myself, trained my first employees myself. In the 5th year, I opened a 3rd store in downtown Portland, right on the corner of Northwest 23rd Avenue, a location the landlord had rejected me for twice because he thought a young woman couldn't afford the rent. I proved him wrong with real revenue. By the time I turned 35, all 3 stores were fully mine. No bank debt, no other shareholders. After-tax profit was around $225,000 a year, enough for me to live comfortably, travel alone a few times a year, renovate my new house in the West Hills, and still put away a solid amount in savings. I was insanely proud. Every morning, my heart still raced, thinking about what I had built from nothing. But I was also lonely, deeply lonely. Every night, I came home to an empty house, cooked for one, watched Netflix alone, spent weekends helping out at the stores. All my friends had families and kids. I dated a few times, but nothing lasted. There was only work, numbers, and a long stretch of silence. And it was in that empty space that Nicholas walked into my life. When I attended a charity fundraiser at St. Mary's Church in West Portland, a small event to support orphan children with homemade baked goods, raffle tickets, and local music performances, I was standing at the ticket booth, smiling and greeting guests, holding a stack of blue tickets in my hand, my mind still on the new shipment of dresses arriving at the store the following week. Then Nicholas Grant appeared. He walked in with an air of confidence. Tall, neatly styled hair under the church's chandelier lights, wearing a light blue plaid shirt and dark jeans, looking like a successful man who had just stepped out of a magazine. He stopped in front of my booth and smiled warmly, his eyes crinkling in a friendly way. "Hello, I'm Nicholas Grant. Just moved here from San Francisco. I'll take 5 tickets." His voice was deep, with a soft California accent. I smiled back. "Hi, I'm Lauren Bennett. 5 tickets are $20. You just moved here? Portland welcomes you, but remember to bring an umbrella. The rain is unpredictable." We joked for a bit. Then he asked about the prizes, a local gift basket with Oregon wine and artisanal cheese. The conversation lasted longer than expected, and he told me he was 42, had been widowed 2 years earlier after a car accident, and was now looking for a quieter life in Portland. We grew close quickly after that evening. Nicholas called me 2 days later and invited me for coffee at a small cafe near Lake Oswego. He talked about himself smoothly. He had been a business consultant for tech startups in Silicon Valley, sold his company at a good price 3 years earlier, and now lived off stock investments and small real estate holdings. "I'm sort of semi-retired," he said, stirring his latte with a playful smile. "Life's short. You have to enjoy it." I nodded, feeling comfortable talking to him. A mature, steady man, unlike the younger guys I had met on dating apps. We became romantic within the first few weeks. Nicholas always knew how to surprise me. One afternoon, he showed up in front of my Beaverton store with a bouquet of white roses, my favorite color, which I had only mentioned once in passing. "Are you busy? I want to take you for a walk in the park nearby," he said, his eyes bright. We walked under rows of cherry trees in bloom, and he listened as I told him about the hard days after Matthew passed, praised my strength, and said he admired women like me, women who rebuilt their lives from ashes. When he asked about my work, I kept it vague. "I manage a few small clothing stores around here," I said, avoiding his gaze. I didn't tell him I owned 3 stores outright, debt-free, with steady revenue. Instead, I deliberately hid it. "Well, the business has a few other shareholders. I'm just the one handling daily operations, sales and staff management." I don't know why I lied like that. Maybe it was instinct from years of struggling alone, or simply a lesson learned from losing Matthew. Don't give anyone leverage too early. But deep inside, a small voice whispered, "Keep a little to yourself, Lauren. Don't open everything all at once." Nicholas nodded, looking genuinely interested. "Sounds good. I have experience in business consulting, so if you ever need help, just tell me." I smiled and changed the subject to the weekend trip he suggested. In the months that followed, we grew closer. Road trips along the Oregon coast, evenings cooking together at my place, him laughing out loud as I tried making homemade sushi for the first time. I thought I had found love again, a man who was understanding, romantic, and respectful of my independence. There were moments when I wondered if I was being too cautious by still hiding the truth. But every time that thought surfaced, another whisper rose inside me. Keep it quiet. Let him love you first. And so I continued playing the role of a devoted manager at a business with multiple shareholders, smiling at the right moments, staying silent when needed. 6 months after we first met, Nicholas proposed to me. It was a perfect afternoon on Cannon Beach, where the massive haystack rocks rose out of the gray sea, waves murmured at our feet, and salty ocean wind whipped against our faces. We walked barefoot on the wet sand, his hand gripping mine, and I felt the warmth from his palm spread through my cold skin. Nicholas stopped suddenly, turned to me with eyes sparkling in the late afternoon light, knelt on one knee in the sand, and pulled a tiny red velvet box from his jacket pocket. "Lauren, you are the most incredible woman I've ever met," he said, his voice trembling with what sounded like sincerity, or at least that's what I thought at the time. "You're strong, beautiful, and you've given me hope for a new life." Will you be my wife? Let's build a future together. The diamond ring glittered in the sun, a perfectly cut stone set on a delicate white gold band. My heart pounded. I nodded, and he stood up, wrapped his arms tightly around me, spinning me on the beach as the waves crashed into white foam around our feet. In that moment, I thought it was the happiest I had been since Matthew passed away. We planned the wedding for the following January, a small, intimate ceremony at St. Mary's Church, where we had met. The weeks that followed passed in the pleasant busyness of invitations and venues until another person entered the story. Jennifer, Nicholas's sister, 34, appeared at the first family dinner after the engagement. She arrived with Nicholas in a neat black dress, a smile that was friendly enough, eyes sharper than the smile. Jennifer shook my hand, complimented my store as having great taste, then sat down at the table as if she had long been comfortable in that role. She asked very polite questions, wrapped in a concerned tone. How many stores do you manage? What's the shareholder structure like? Do you have plans to protect your finances when you get married? Nicholas stayed quiet, sipping his wine, letting her speak. I answered the same way as before, vague, rounded. But this time there was a light, steady, irritating knock in my chest. Jennifer didn't beat around the bush. I think you two should talk about money early, she said, placing her knife and fork neatly together. Transparency makes marriages stronger, a prenup, for example. I looked at Nicholas, waiting for reassurance. He placed his hand over mine, his voice softening. Jennifer's just looking out for me, Lauren. But she has a point. We should do this properly. That night, when I got home, I stood in the kitchen longer than usual, watching my reflection in the glass, unease spreading like cold water. Not because of the prenup, but because of how they talked about it. Too early, too smooth, as if it had been rehearsed. The unease grew when Nicholas started asking privately. One Sunday morning, as we lay in bed, he stroked my hair and whispered, "Love, I think we should talk about our financial future. I don't want you to worry about anything, but with my experience, I could help you manage the stores better." In the end, I was the one who asked for a prenuptial agreement. Not because I feared loss, but because I needed to see the reaction. Nicholas agreed immediately, so quickly it surprised me. "I respect what you've built," he said. "We'll do it the way you feel safe." The meeting with his lawyer took place in a bright office that smelled of fresh coffee. The draft slid across the table. I read every line. When we reached the page about business assets, Nicholas's lawyer cleared his throat and proposed a new clause. After 5 years of marriage, business assets would be considered for sharing based on contribution. I looked up. "No," I said, my voice oddly calm. "The business is my separate property." Nicholas frowned slightly, then quickly recovered his smile and turned to the lawyer. "Remove that clause," he said. "Keep Lauren's asset protection intact." I signed. He signed. The pen hit the table with a dull sound. Everyone smiled, shook hands, offered congratulations. But as we left the office, inside the mirrored elevator, I saw Jennifer look at me through the reflection, a brief, sharp look, unsmiling. The wedding went ahead as planned, at St. Mary's Church, where everything had begun. The aisle was filled with white flowers and soft winter sunlight filtering through stained glass windows, casting shimmering patterns across the stone floor. I wore a simple white lace dress from my own store, held a bouquet of wild daisies, my heart racing as I walked in with my best friend as maid of honor. Nicholas stood there, handsome in a charcoal gray suit, smiling brightly, looking at me as if I were the only treasure in the world. We exchanged vows before the elderly priest, with about 50 guests, friends, my store employees, and his small family, including Jennifer in the front row, clapping enthusiastically while her eyes skimmed over me in a strange measuring way. "You'll always be mine," Nicholas whispered as he slipped the ring onto my finger, and I smiled, thinking I had finally found love again. Our honeymoon in Maui was a dream. We flew to Hawaii the next day, stayed at a small beachfront resort with private bungalows overlooking the deep blue ocean and white-capped waves crashing against black volcanic rocks. During the day, we went snorkeling, holding hands under the crystal-clear water, watching sea turtles glide past vibrant coral reefs. At night, we lay on lounge chairs on the balcony, listening to the waves murmur, Nicholas holding me from behind, whispering sweet words. My love, I've never been this happy. We'll build an empire together, won't we? I smiled and nodded, but inside, a flicker of something felt off. Why was he talking about an empire on our honeymoon? I pushed the thought away, enjoying the warmth of his body, the familiar scent of sandalwood on his skin, and the sound of our laughter echoing under a sky full of stars. But when we returned to Portland, reality began to seep in. Nicholas moved fully into my house in the West Hills, bringing a few boxes of personal belongings, business books, a laptop, and old photos of his family. At first, everything was fine, but gradually, he began to hint at my business constantly, like a quiet underground leak. One evening, as I was checking invoices in the living room, the warm yellow desk lamp casting light over the scattered paperwork, Nicholas sat down beside me, a glass of wine in his hand, stroking my shoulder. Love, I think your stores have huge potential. Why don't we expand to Seattle? I could invest, or help you find good investors. I looked up, forcing a smile. I'm content with the 3 stores I have. I don't want to take risks. But he didn't stop, his eyes bright with calculation. I just want to help you. With my consulting experience, we could double revenue in 2 years. The suggestions grew more frequent. Nicholas started talking about investing. You should diversify, stocks or small real estate. I have some great ideas. Or, let me manage part of the finances. You're already busy with the stores. I felt a wave of unease rising, like mild nausea, whenever he brought it up. But I told myself, maybe he's just being enthusiastic. Jennifer joined in too, calling weekly. Lauren, I have a great idea for your website. Let me help optimize the tech and boost online sales? Her voice was sweet, but I could hear a strange urgency beneath it. 3 months after the honeymoon, things escalated. One Saturday afternoon, I came home from a shift at the downtown store, exhausted, my legs aching from standing all day, the soft scent of vanilla from the candles filling the house. Nicholas was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, beside a strange man in a black suit, holding a pencil and taking notes. Love, this is Mr. Robert, a business valuation specialist. I invited him to take a quick look at your books, Nicholas said cheerfully, as if introducing a friend. I froze in the doorway, my bag dropping to the floor. My books? Why didn't you ask me first? Nicholas stood up and put an arm around my shoulders. I just want to help. To see the real value of the stores, then we could borrow capital to expand. Mr. Robert nodded, his professional smile in place. It'll only take an hour, Mrs. Bennett. I shook my head, my voice firm. No, sorry, there's nothing to appraise. From that day on, the private calls increased. Nicholas took calls on the balcony, turning his back. Jennifer texted asking, Have you reconsidered? Every proposal wore a polite coat: efficiency, growth, protection. But underneath was a line they wanted me to cross. A signature, an access right, a single permission. I kept smiling, kept saying maybe later, kept the keys in my own pocket. Not because I was stubborn, but because in that silence, I heard one thing very clearly. Someone was waiting for me to slip, and I had no intention of giving them the chance. One day, I suddenly came home early, turning into the driveway at nearly 3 in the afternoon. Nicholas's silver sedan was already there. Strange. That morning, he had said he had client meetings all day and would be home late. I entered through the garage, set my bag down in the kitchen, and froze when I saw 2 wine glasses in the sink. We hadn't had wine the night before. I had been reviewing reports until nearly 11, while Nicholas watched part of some show and went to bed early. The house was quiet in an unfamiliar way. Then I heard laughter. A woman's laughter. It drifted from my office, the room Nicholas rarely went into because the chair hurt his back and the desk was too high for his frame. I walked down the hallway, slowly, the door ajar. The scene inside was frozen like a still frame. Nicholas was there, and Jennifer, the one always introduced as his sister. They were siblings, so what were they doing in my house? She was sitting with her back turned. My husband was sitting in my chair, one hand resting on her waist like an old habit, the other sliding inside her thin dress. She laughed softly, saying something about, "Once she signs, it's all done." And he replied in a whisper about power of attorney and splitting it later, followed by moans, satisfied sounds filling the room. I stood there for 5 seconds, just standing and watching, letting reality seep into every cell. Then I quietly took out my phone, opened the camera, pressed record, and held it toward the door. "You're sure this signature will look closer this time, right? The one in Oakland almost blew it because the pen strokes didn't match." Nicholas chuckled softly, his voice low and confident. "Relax. I've been practicing for a month. We'll submit the transfer papers for 30% of the shares first, then take the rest slowly. She still thinks I really love her. Give it a little more time. Once she fully trusts me, we'll move fast, like with the 2 victims before." Jennifer pressed closer. "And if she doesn't cooperate in time?" Nicholas shrugged, his hand still roaming her waist. "Then we divorce, still get half under Oregon law. But I prefer the old way, clean and quick." I stood there, blood congealing in my veins, without making a single sound. I recorded a few more minutes, long enough to capture the entire plan of forging signatures, filing transfer documents, and the cold words about pray. My heart was pounding, but my mind was eerily clear. I eased back into the hallway, stopped the recording, slipped my phone into my pocket, then quietly returned to the garage, got in my car, and drove away. Not a sound, not a confrontation, not letting them know I had heard everything. I drove around Portland for 2 hours, hands gripping the steering wheel, tears streaming, my mind spinning with what I had heard. Jennifer wasn't his sister, she was his mistress, his accomplice. They were having sex on my desk and planning to steal my assets like it was a game. I stopped at a small cafe, opened my phone, backed up the recording to the cloud, sent a copy to myself through encrypted email, then texted my lawyer Margaret, "I need to see you tomorrow, and we may need a private investigator too." That evening, after driving around Portland for 2 hours to calm myself down, I came home wearing the most normal face I could manage. Nicholas was sitting on the sofa, watching TV as if nothing had happened. Jennifer was already gone. He turned to me with that familiar smile. "Love, you're home so late?" I was worried. I forced a small smile, kept my voice steady. "Yeah, a meeting with suppliers ran long. I'm exhausted." The next morning, I got up early, made coffee, and went to work like any other day, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I watched Nicholas more closely. The way he always asked about my schedule, the way he secretly checked his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, the way Jennifer called constantly, with that fake, sisterly tone. 2 weeks later, Margaret called me into her office, a dark wood room in downtown Portland, stacked high with files and smelling of old coffee. She slid a thick folder across the desk, her face grave. "Lauren, sit down. What I found, it's much worse than you think." The investigation results made my blood run cold. Nicholas Grant was not a widower or a successful business consultant at all. He had gone bankrupt twice, first in 2012 after failed stock investments, racking up hundreds of thousands in credit card debt. Again in 2019 when a fake consulting company was sued for defrauding clients. There was no company sold for a windfall, no smart investments, just debt and a history of dodging court appearances. Detective Mark dug deeper, Nicholas was a professional con artist, targeting widows who owned small businesses in California and Oregon, marrying them, and then stealing their assets through elaborate schemes. Jennifer was not his biological sister. She was his longtime mistress and main accomplice. They met through an online fraud group, where Nicholas taught her how to probe victims through intimate conversations and gather financial information. Jennifer always played the role of the concerned sister, but in reality, she was the detailed planner, monitoring emails, suggesting paperwork, even helping forge signatures using photo editing software. They had done this at least 3 times before me. The first victim was Patricia in Sacramento in 2015, a widow who owned a small chain of flower shops. Nicholas married her after just 4 months of dating, convinced her to sign over all her assets for love and investing in the future. She died 6 months later from medical complications, but Patricia's sister sued, accusing Nicholas of exploiting her illness, forcing her to sign documents when she wasn't lucid. The court dismissed the case due to lack of direct evidence. The second victim was Helen in San Jose in 2018, the owner of a well-known bakery. Helen was healthy, but she signed over her assets just 3 months after the wedding, then died from a fall down the stairs, a suspicious accident the police ruled as negligence. The third victim, in Oakland in 2020, survived, a woman named Lisa, the owner of a used bookstore. Lisa divorced Nicholas after discovering financial abuse, money transferred from joint accounts without consent, pressure to sign loans in her name. She told the detective he was always sweet at first, bringing flowers, cooking, but gradually he asked about money, records, and Jennifer was always there to help. Lisa lost nearly half her assets due to a weak prenup, but she was lucky to catch it early because of a strange invoice. But none of that was the worst part. The detective discovered that Nicholas had submitted documents with my forged signature to the Oregon Business Registry the week before, requesting the transfer of 30% of Lauren's closet shares into his name under the pretext of family business cooperation. The signature looked identical to mine, but Margaret analyzed it. The strokes slightly shaky, the ink laser printed instead of ballpoint like I usually use. "This is a crime, Lauren," Margaret said, her voice shaking with anger. "I've contacted the county police. We have evidence, the recording, his history, and the forged documents." I asked the only question left. "What do we do now?" Margaret closed the file. "Now we do exactly what they think you won't do," she said. "Lauren, I've contacted the FBI. This is a federal crime because they operate across state lines. Agent Ryan will meet you this afternoon. But from now until they have enough to make arrests, you have to act normal. 6 weeks, Lauren. 6 weeks to gather more evidence. Log everything, calls, messages, strange behavior. Install hidden cameras if needed. Don't let them suspect anything." I left the office with a stack of papers in my bag, stepped out into the Portland midday sun, feeling like I had just stood up after a long fall. I wasn't angry. I was clear-headed. Because when the truth becomes clear enough, the choice is no longer emotional. It's strategic. The 6 weeks that followed were the longest stretch of my life, even though every day looked exactly like the one before it. I came home every evening with a practiced smile, hugged Nicholas as if nothing were wrong, while my mind spun with images of him and Jennifer in bed together. He still brought home flowers, cooked dinner, my favorite Italian pasta, bright red tomato sauce, and fragrant basil filling the kitchen. "Love, how was your day?" he asked, eyes shining under the warm kitchen light, his hand resting on my back. I smiled. "Fine. Just busy." I still nodded when Jennifer dropped by to visit her brother, smiled as they talked about future plans in voices full of goodwill. I learned to place my phone face down but keep the recorder on in my pocket. I wrote everything down in a thin notebook hidden behind the kitchen drawer. Dates, times, exact words, who spoke first, who followed. Small details became data, the way Nicholas urged me to review the power of attorney, the way Jennifer reminded me, "Don't forget to sign the addendum," the calls they took on the balcony, whispering just long enough to think I couldn't hear. At night, when Nicholas slept, I opened the notebook and rewrote every fragment of conversation so I wouldn't forget. I didn't argue, I didn't react, I observed. There were moments I had to step out of the bathroom just to breathe because my hands were shaking. There were dinners so quiet the sound of a knife touching a plate felt like metal scraping bone. But I kept the rhythm. I remembered Margaret's words. They'll slip when they think you're at ease. And they did. Nicholas started talking more, growing more confident, referring to documents as already agreed. Jennifer sent long messages, step-by-step instructions to keep things smooth. I forwarded everything to Miller, with screenshots, with timestamps. Every Thursday evening, I got a short call. That's enough. You're doing great. Keep going. The FBI guided me through Agent Ryan, a tall man with a calm, steady voice over the phone. Mrs. Bennett, stay calm. Send us every message, every email. If he pressures you to sign anything, photograph it and decline politely. I followed instructions, recording details, dates, words, expressions. One evening, Nicholas spread a fresh stack of papers across the dining table, under the dim yellow light, pointing. Sign here, love. Just authorizing me to handle this year's taxes. Easy. His hand trembled slightly, his eyes avoiding mine. I shook my head. Let me review it carefully first. Then I sent the photos to the FBI, thinking, they're rushing. They know time is running out. The 6 weeks dragged on like torture. I slept poorly, waking in the middle of the night from nightmares of losing my stores. But I held on, because I knew law enforcement was building a solid case, securing warrants, gathering statements from previous victims, tracking their suspicious transfers. Finally, the arrest day came. It was a Wednesday evening. I deliberately invited Jennifer over for dinner to celebrate our second wedding anniversary. A fake family meal with black pepper steak, fresh salad, and the red wine Nicholas liked. The table was set beautifully under flickering candlelight, the smell of roasted meat filling the room, but inside I was cold. Nicholas sat at the head of the table, smiling broadly. Love, I'm so proud of you. We're going to grow the business together. Jennifer sat beside him in a tight red dress, giggling. That's right, sis. I'll help you with everything. I nodded, my hand clenching the napkin under the table. Just as dessert, the smooth, creamy tiramisu, was served, the doorbell rang. I stood up to open the door, my heart pounding. 3 FBI agents in plain clothes stepped inside, badges glinting beneath their jackets. Everything happened too fast for me to think. Nicholas went pale, his wine glass shattering on the wooden floor, shards scattered under the wavering candlelight. What is this? This is a mistake, he shouted, jumping to his feet. Jennifer burst into tears, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The agents handcuffed them, read them their Miranda rights, while Nicholas looked at me with a searching expression. Not apology, but shock. Jennifer started talking rapidly, denying everything, then fell silent when an agent produced printed messages and the audio recordings. I stood by the dining table, both hands resting on the cold stone surface. No one asked if I was okay. There was no need. As they led Nicholas and Jennifer outside, rain began to fall, soft, steady, the way it always does in Portland. I watched through the window as they were put into the car. The doors closed. The sound disappeared. The house returned to silence, but a different kind of silence. I went into the kitchen, made myself a hot cup of coffee, and for the first time in weeks, let out a long, slow breath. Not because I felt relieved, but because everything had finally moved in the direction I chose. The trial was nothing like people imagine. There were no long speeches, no dramatic tears, only time, slow, heavy, and truths laid out on the table in the proper order. I sat in the public gallery, wearing a severe black suit from my own store, watching Nicholas and Jennifer being led in wearing bright orange prison uniforms, handcuffs dangling, their faces hollow under the cold fluorescent lights of the Portland courtroom. Nicholas, once a well-groomed man with a warm smile, now scruffy, dark circles under his eyes, stared at me with burning hatred as he took his seat at the defendant's table. Jennifer beside him, hair tangled and unkempt. The prosecutor presented the evidence without mercy, the audio recording from my phone, Nicholas's cold voice discussing prey and forgery plans, emails between them detailing how to seize assets, testimony from Lisa in Oakland, her voice trembling on video. He destroyed my life, forced me to sign documents I didn't understand, then walked away with half my assets. The judge, a middle-aged woman with stern black-rimmed glasses, struck the gavel. The evidence is clear. This is not love. This is systematic crime. Nicholas shouted from the defense table. She's lying. I truly loved her. But no one believed him. The judge delivered the sentence, her voice echoing in the silent room. Nicholas Grant, 12 years in prison. Jennifer Lee, 8 years in prison. The defendants exploited the trust of lonely women to steal their property. The gavel fell like thunder, and they were led away, Nicholas turning to look at me one last time, muttering, "You'll regret this." But I looked straight back. "No. You will." I divorced Nicholas immediately after his arrest, just weeks after that fateful night. Margaret drafted the paperwork swiftly, and the divorce hearing proceeded smoothly under spring sunlight, filtering through the courtroom windows. The judge reviewed the prenup and nodded. The agreement is clear. Mrs. Bennett's premarital assets remain hers. The defendant is entitled to nothing. Nicholas, appearing from prison by video call, his face twisted. "You can't do this. We're married." But my lawyer cut him off. "The prenup was signed, Mr. Grant." I sat there, gripping the chair, a rush of freedom filling my chest. The divorce was finalized in just 3 months, fast, clean, and Nicholas walked away with nothing because of the ironclad prenup I had insisted on keeping intact. When the divorce papers were signed, I stepped out of the courthouse, golden sunlight washing over the busy streets of Portland, traffic noise swelling like a victory symphony. I took a deep breath, the smell of coffee drifting from a nearby cafe, and Lauren's closet, 3 stores strong, still stood firm, customers still smiling as they tried on clothes, employees still calling me boss, with respect. Today, at 37, I'm still standing here, in the familiar space of Lauren's closet in downtown Portland, where soft summer sunlight filters through the large glass windows, casting shimmering streaks of light over neatly arranged clothing racks. All 3 stores are still operating strongly. Last year's revenue surpassed $1.5 million, and I remain the sole owner. No debt, no partners, no sharing with anyone. Every morning, I wake up early, brew a hot cup of black coffee in my own kitchen, the sharp, bitter aroma spreading like a reminder that my days of freedom have returned. I drive to the first store in Beaverton, step into a space filled with the scent of new fabric and the light perfume of silk dresses hanging loosely. The staff greet me with bright smiles. "Boss, the new shipment is in. Absolutely stunning." And I nod, arranging each dress with my own hands, smoothing out the wrinkles, feeling a quiet peace flow through those ordinary movements. No more fear that someone is secretly calculating behind my back. No more sleepless nights fueled by doubt. My life now is a new beginning, light and free like the ocean wind that once swept across Cannon Beach, but without the pain it once carried. I still live alone in my West Hills house, but now that solitude has turned into peace. Evenings spent on the balcony, watching the city lights shimmer below the hill, holding a warm cup of tea, listening to the wind whisper through the cherry trees. No Nicholas, no Jennifer, just me with myself, and that makes me prouder than ever. I've even opened a small new branch in Bend, personally choosing the location, designing the interior with light wooden shelves and warm lighting, a place where customers can try on clothes in a space that feels like a small cafe. "This outfit looks amazing on me. Thank you so much," a middle-aged customer told me yesterday, and I smiled back. "I'm proud to help you feel more confident." Those are healing moments, reminders that I made it through, that I rose again from the ashes. I often think about other women out there, women like me, strong, yet sometimes vulnerable when it comes to love. And I tell them, in conversations with friends or the women who work for me, trust your instincts. When something feels off, don't ignore it. Protect what you've built, your business, your assets, or even just your heart. And don't be afraid to be cautious in love. Real love doesn't pressure you, doesn't pry, doesn't calculate. It allows you to remain yourself. A young employee once asked me, "Lauren, why are you still single after everything?" I smiled, touching the simple diamond ring on my finger. Not from Nicholas, but one I bought for myself. Because I'm free, I said. Free to love myself first. And now, as the sun sets, I stand alone by the store window, watching the hurried flow of people outside, knowing that I've healed. No more nightmares of loss, only peace. The peace of a woman who has learned to protect herself, who has found strength and independence, and who is ready for new beginnings without needing anyone to hold her hand. My self-made life isn't lonely. It's freedom. The freedom to breathe, to create, to love without fear. And if there's one final piece of advice I want to leave with anyone listening, it's this. Remember that in the long, winding journey of life, what you build with your own sweat and tears is your own castle, and the key to protecting it isn't blind love, but gentle clarity in the small secrets you keep for yourself.